Good morning, everybody. Good morning and happy Tuesday, everybody. Today is December 19th, 2023, and the top story this morning is the Bank of Japan did nothing. And, well, that's something, because the Bank of Japan has pretty much sat out this entire rate hike tightening cycle that the rest of the world has been in since the end of 2021, beginning of 2022. Bank of Japan has done nothing. They left interest rates negative. Their overnight rate remains in negative territory, which means you need to pay the bank for the pleasure of storing your money with them if that's the duration that you're depositing in. Well, guys, the Bank of Japan has been trying to create what they refer to as a virtuous cycle of inflation. And I roll my eyes every time I say that because it's just the most obscene slogan I've ever heard in my life. The virtuous cycle of inflation is the Keynesian belief that with the Bank of Japan, if they expand monetary policy and they cause inflation, then consumers will start making more money and therefore they'll start spending more money and therefore the economy will grow. And that sounds great on paper, but like pretty much everything with Keynesian economics, it doesn't work that way because here on planet Earth, inflation works differently. Inflation first chases asset prices, which makes the rich richer. It bids up stocks, it bids up bonds, it bids up home prices. See also record high homelessness in the United States, courtesy of the inflation wave we saw last year. First, you bid up asset prices, then consumer prices rise, and last but not least, finally, wages rise if you're lucky. Although here in the States, right as that last phase sets in, the Fed rides in and says, rate hikes, no, we don't want your wages to rise. So what Japan is trying to do doesn't work because the wages are the last thing to rise in that cycle. So they're saying we're not going to stop this policy until we're convinced that we're seeing real wage growth. It's never going to happen because wages are always playing catch up to consumer prices, and consumer prices are always playing catch up to asset prices when central banks inflate. So everybody thought when Kazuo Ueda took over at the head of the Bank of Japan, that was at the end of March, everybody thought Japan was instantly going to reverse this negative interest rate policy, this yield curve control, where they print infinite amount of money in order to keep interest rates below the threshold that they want. Everybody thought on day one, Kazuo Ueda was going to change that, probably because that's what Kazuo Ueda said he was going to do, or at least he suggested that's what he was going to do. He was viewed as a hawk by many, certainly far more hawkish than Kuroda, the guy that preceded him. Well, right as Kazuo Ueda took over at the Bank of Japan, banks in the United States started to fail. And, well, starting a tightening cycle while banks in the world's largest economy are failing, maybe that scared him a little bit. But he didn't just put plans on pause. He hasn't done anything yet. Some minor tweaks to what they're allowing the 10-year Japanese government bond yield to do. They've allowed that to go a little bit higher. And by a little bit higher, I mean from 0.5% to 1%, and it's back down around 0.7 now. But the Bank of Japan is still living in this modern monetary theory fantasy land. They had an opportunity to change that yesterday. It was about 50-50, the odds of whether they were going to change it or do nothing. They opted to do nothing, and they're just going to inflate some more. And I'm sure those real wage gains are around here somewhere. No, they're never going to appear. They're just going to keep inflating, and they're just going to keep making things worse for people in Japan. Also, we've got a major cold spell broke out in China recently. Temperatures in parts of China could reach as low as negative 47 degrees Celsius. No, thank you. The reason I mention that is, well, Beijing is right in the bullseye of this cold spell. There's only about 21.5 million people in Beijing. And while this could impact global energy markets, China does not have energy security. They're a major importer of energy. It's one of the big weaknesses, along with food supply in China. They're a major exporter of manufactured goods, certainly. But as far as food and energy comes, they are hopelessly dependent on imports. So China's going to be importing a lot more energy over the next few weeks as this cold spell hits. I don't know that that's going to be enough to move the needle on energy markets, but it could. And keep in mind, China imports that energy, so they're dependent on shipping. And well, shipping is a little messy right now, isn't it? The Red Sea, about 8% of the world's oil flows through the BAM, the Bab el Mandeb Strait. A lot of people commented and said, Jack, just call it BAM because it is a mouthful, Bab el Mandeb. Okay, we're just going to say BAM from now on. 8% of the world's oil flows through BAM. 12% of global trade flows through BAM. And shipping is already strained a little bit. And on top of that, by the way, we've got a drought in Panama that is causing a reduced number of ships to be able to traverse the Panama Canal. So global freight's kind of a mess right now. Keep an eye on those freight carriers. So I'm not sure if this cold spell in China is going to cause a problem in energy markets. But guys, let's think about it. European energy policy has only gotten worse since last year. European energy policy is run by imbeciles and children who were neglected in their formative years. And so now they dye their hair pink and they throw Campbell's soup at paintings while gluing themselves to things. And that's what passes for energy policy in Europe. Well, they've only made things worse. They dodged a bullet last winter because we had an unusually warm winter last year. And so energy prices crashed. And Europe mistook that for doing things right. They just got lucky. And so they just doubled down on stupid. What if this winter comes out to be a cold one? Well, let's think about it a little bit. Yeah, you've got US LNG. That could fill in some of the gaps. You're not getting any gas from Russia. We've had another pipeline blew up, the one that connects Finland and I believe Finland and Estonia. That pipeline was also blown up. Didn't get nearly as much attention. Another big pipeline attack. That happened a few months ago here in Europe. And then you've also got now Qatari LNG could potentially have a hard time reaching Europe because right now, if Qatar sells LNG, they're one of the biggest players in the liquefied natural gas market. They sell through the Strait of Hormuz, around the Arabian Peninsula, through BAM, through the Suez Canal to be able to sell their LNG in the European markets. Well, Qatari LNG, which is a big source of energy for Europe, especially now that Russia's off the board, now they got to sail all the way around the Horn of Africa. So that's going to be a little more expensive. That's going to, a little bit more is going to boil off in transit. Liquefied natural gas has to be kept super cooled. And while it's traversing, while it's on the boat, it's actually starting to boil off. So there's going to be a little bit more losses in transit on that longer run. So keep an eye on European energy markets too. They're basically dependent on the weather. So that's something to keep an eye on also. And with that, why don't we shrink my big melon of a head and let's see what's going on in markets. Could this blow off top get any better, any higher? Well, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. And let's see. We do this every morning. Have your coffee with the melon heads. Still in extreme greed territory. That's 2 days in a row. We're now at 77 on the fear greed index. The S&P 500 is up another 7 points this morning, just barely in positive territory. It's down off its highs ahead of the opening bell. Check out the S&P 500 chart, though, guys. Look at this run. Almost 630 points since October 27th. I have never seen a rally this abrupt, this quick. I mean, talk about a blow off top straight up in a matter of not even a month. This thing has rallied something like 15%. And look at the RSI in the S&P 500 down here at the bottom. Let's make that a little bit bigger. Check out the relative strength index. We are around 81 for the RSI on the S&P 500. Talk about overbought. When's the last time we were this overbought? We have not been this overbought since September of 2020. And we did have a little bit of a pullback in September of 2020. It wasn't a very big one. But needless to say, guys, this market is due for a pullback. But we could stay up here for a while. The RSI could trade sideways. Markets could continue moving higher. I'm not saying that pullback starts today. I'm just saying we are severely overdue for a correction. Nothing runs straight up forever. And check this out. Talk about blow off top. S&P 500. This is the SPY ETF. And we're talking about cash flows and the biggest flow of money into the S&P 500 SPY ETF ever. Look at this, guys. I believe these are weekly data points. Over $20 billion flowed into the S&P 500 ETF. Just the SPY. Over $20 billion. People are passively dumping money into the stock market, and they're not even looking at what they're buying. They're just buying it all. I'm sure nothing bad could happen when people just mindlessly dump $20 billion into stocks because some bureaucrat in D.C. said a thing. What's the worst that could happen? Don't answer that. Meanwhile, the Dow is up another 62 points ahead of the opening bell. That is about 0.2% higher this morning. Another good morning for the Dow. And the NASDAQ is up 0.1% or about 19 points higher ahead of the opening bell. So all three indexes are in the green once again this morning. Looking over at commodities, we have got February gold futures up another $4, $2,044.65, about 0.2% higher. March silver futures 24.23. That's up another 13 cents this morning, 0.5%. We have got platinum is pretty much unchanged. Palladium about the same, up 0.75%. And West Texas Intermediate February futures trading at 73.22. That's up another 40 cents this morning, or about 0.5%. Looking over at the U.S. dollar, the Dixie is lower again this morning, 25 basis points to the downside, now at 102.31. Are we going to see a 101 handle on the Dixie? We probably will soon, because the dollar keeps weakening. Even though the yen is much weaker today, the strength in the euro is more than offsetting that in the Dixie math, but the dollar is heading lower at the moment. Looking over at the bond market, we have got 30-year treasuries down another 5 basis points, 4.02% for the 30-year. The 10-year treasury yielding 3.909. That's also down almost 5 basis points this morning. The 2-year, 4.452, down about 0.5 point. And the 1 month at 5.35, that's down about 1 point. The 1 month, we're starting to see that one tick down a little bit. People are starting to front run the rate cuts. We should also be seeing the 3 month and the 6 month start to drag down as people start to get more and more certain that those rate cuts are coming, whether it be March or May. We're going to see the short end of the curve is going to start heading lower here soon. Also, reverse repo watch, guys. We took a tick up by about $41.5 billion yesterday. Still within the noise, the bouncing of the chart here at $724.7 billion in the reverse repo. Still on pace to hit zero by the middle to the end of February. And here's the main story this morning. The BOJ keeps ultra-loose policy, offers few hints on exit timing, and there is Kazuo Ueda right there as he continues to do nothing. The Bank of Japan maintained ultra-loose policy settings on Tuesday in a widely expected move as the bank opted to await more evidence on whether wages and prices would rise enough to justify a shift away from massive monetary stimulus. Well, prices might rise, but the wages won't, guys. It just doesn't work that way. The central bank also made no change to its dovish policy guidance, dashing hopes among some traders that it would tweak the language to signal a near-term end of negative interest rates. BOJ Governor Kazuo Ueda said prices and wages appeared to be moving in the right direction, with labor unions and big firms signaling the chance of sustained wage gains next year, but he warned conditions remained uncertain. And that statement right there is just utter BS because, yes, nominal wages are rising, but they're rising at about half the pace of inflation in Japan. So Japan has not seen one single yen of real wage gains in this whole god-awful experiment in modern monetary theory going on in Japan. So when he's saying, yeah, prices and wages appear to be moving in the right direction, to him, that direction is up, but prices are going up faster than wages, which means poor people are getting poorer. And he's sitting here saying, oh, yeah, this is encouraging. These are the people who are making decisions, who are running the economies around the world. The chance of trend inflation accelerating towards our price target is gradually heightening, Ueda said in a press conference after the meeting, but we still need to scrutinize whether a positive wage inflation cycle will fall in place. You go ahead and scrutinize all you want, Ueda. It is not going to fall in place. It just doesn't work like that. But good luck with your money printing, sir. No, really, I hope your burr goes really well. And here we go. The Japanese yen weakening today. Is now, keep in mind, guys, this is the U.S. dollar versus the Japanese yen. So if you see this chart heading higher, that is the yen weakening. If you see this chart heading lower, that is the yen strengthening. And here you can see yesterday, big green candle up. The yen has weakened substantially on this news by about 2 yen to the dollar, currently at 144.3 yen to make 1 U.S. dollar. Is this going to be enough to reverse this trend in the dollar's decline recently? Probably not, but we'll see what happens there. Also, what happened? I had my China story. I guess I lost it here. U.S. launches Operation Prosperity Garden to defend Red Sea shipping lanes from Houthi attacks. Operation Prosperity Garden. Yeah. maybe we shouldn't have the campaign managers picking the names of our military operations. I'm just going to throw that out there. That is a very terrible, stupid sounding name. But let's not get hung up on the name. The U.S. officials on Monday expanded a multinational maritime force in the Red Sea to defend against escalating attacks from Iran's backed Houthis rebels, which have impeded international shipping routes. We got this soundbite here. The new defense, named Operation Prosperity Guardian, builds on the power of combined maritime forces, a 39-member international coalition. The CMF operates under the U.S. Navy Fifth Fleet in Bahrain to protect maritime access and stability. A subdivision of the forces called Task Force 153 is dedicated to the Red Sea. What we're trying to do is strengthen and bolster it, operationalize it in ways that perhaps it hadn't been operationalized prior to these Houthi attacks, National Security Council John Kirby said of Task Force 153. Good luck with the operationalizing. I'm not really sure what that means. Look, this is it. They're saying it's a 39-member international coalition. To my knowledge, there are 4 countries that have actually sent ships to the Red Sea. The United States, which sent a lot of ships, the French, the British, and the Spanish, who each sent 1. So you can call that a 39-member international coalition, but really what it is U.S. sailors and U.S. ships protecting trade routes so cargo containers full of poorly made plastic Chinese crap can be sold into European markets. That's really what we're doing. A lot of that trade, the Red Sea, the BAM, is a vital link in the Asia to Europe trade route. So the United States Navy is defending China's trade interests. China has been building out their Navy quite substantially over these last few years. Why are the Chinese not defending their own trade routes? I just throw them out there, guys. You know, instead of the Chinese just sitting there preparing for war with Taiwan and the United States, maybe they could pitch in and defend their own trade routes. Better yet, maybe the United States could say, China, you do what you want. We're not protecting your ships. I just throw them out there. You guys do what you want with them. Or, you know, whatever, Team America, World Police, yay, good luck. Parts of China gripped by record low temperatures as icy snap intensifies. Temperatures in parts of China, including in province Shaanxi, Hebei, I'm going to butcher these names, and Liaoning, hit their lowest levels since records began, state broadcasters said on Sunday, as a cold snap gripped large swaths of the country. The city of Yichun, I'm not going to pronounce, some Chinese city in the northeast, could see a record low of minus 47.9 degrees Celsius, which is negative 54 degrees Fahrenheit for those who don't habla metric. That's recorded in January of 1980. Could be broken early next week, according to meteorological forecasters from the area. The storage of thermal coal should be done in advance to ensure the normal power generation at power plants during this critical period. This is the government ministers talking. It also called on local authorities to ensure that the national energy supply and demand are stable and orderly. Guys, negative 54F, negative 47, negative 48C. I mean, you're talking a few minutes and you're dead out if you're caught outside in these temperatures. These are brutal cold. The city of Beijing is right in the path of this stuff. This is going to make a mess in China. I don't know how long it's going to last. Is this going to turn into like a Texas deep freeze, but on the scale of 21 million people in Beijing? Or is this just going to be something that causes China to burn a little bit of extra coal for a couple of days? But the numbers here, the temperatures are really catastrophically low. So it's worth keeping an eye on this story. We'll know more by next week. A couple other things going on in the world today. Google's going to pay $700 million for their App Store settlement. This agreement with a coalition of states resolving antitrust litigation. Google parent Alphabet agreed to pay $700 million and make certain changes to its App Store, settling one of several antitrust challenges to the search engine company. The settlement resolves around claims by a group of states that Google operated its App Store, Google Play, as an illegal monopoly, allegedly stifling competition from other app distributors on devices using the Google-owned Android operating system. Alphabet will contribute $630 million to a settlement fund distributed to benefit consumers per a court-approved plan, and will pay $70 million into a fund used by states, the company said. A lot of antitrust cases going on. I mean, there's always antitrust going on against Google to one extent or another, but a couple of big ones in recent days. Recall there was that big Apple Spotify dispute in Europe that they're saying could cost Apple billions of dollars. Now Google getting hit by $700 million. Guys, the Magnificent Seven, I get it. They're running like crazy. They're in a blow off top right now, but I think there is a reckoning coming for the Mag 7, and it is going to be brutal in 2024 for the Magnificent Seven. Shout out to you, NVIDIA. Sooner or later, that round tripping will come back to haunt you. Apple races to tweak software ahead of looming U.S. watch ban. This one just hit yesterday. The company is submitting software workaround to the customs agency. This one just hit recently. Could affect Apple's numbers, but maybe not by a huge amount. Apple is just days away from a U.S. ban of its smartwatches, and they're planning a rescue mission for the $17 billion business that includes software fixes and other potential workarounds. Engineers at the company are racing to make changes to algorithms on the device that measure a user's blood oxygen level, a feature that Massimo Corp has argued infringes on its patents. They're adjusting how the technology determines oxygen saturation and presents the data to customers, according to people familiar with the work. So they're not going to really change the device. They're just going to change the software and the user interface a little bit and hope that gets them out of patent jail. It's a high-stakes engineering effort, unlike any Apple has undertaken before, though the iPhone maker's products have previously been barred in certain countries over legal disputes. This restriction would hit one of Apple's biggest moneymakers in its home country, and on Christmas, no less. Without a last-minute veto by the White House, a ban imposed by the International Trade Commission will take effect on December 25th. Now, wearables is not the biggest category for Apple's revenue. Apple gets about 5%, about 5% of its revenue, or 15% of its revenue from wearables. But that also includes the AirBuds, which is a bigger seller than the Apple Watch. I did some just quick, random number generated math here. This could potentially hit Apple's revenue by something like 1 to 2%. It's not a deal breaker for Apple, but Apple has other problems going on, like the App Store antitrust case, and certainly geopolitical tension going on in China with Foxconn right now. So keep an eye on this one. This could ding Apple's earnings, especially because it's happening right before Christmas. But again, really, iPhone is the big moneymaker for Apple, so it's not going to be the end of the world. And one last one I wanted to talk about here. Marvel drops actor Jonathan Majors after assault conviction, sources say. Jonathan Majors, I'm not going to spend too much time on it. There he is. Jonathan Majors is the actor who plays Kang the Conqueror, who is the big bad villain in this new MCU phase that they're in. He's like the Thanos of this recent batch of movies. And that story arc is just getting started. He was in the Ant-Man movie. He was in the 2 seasons of Loki. And well, now they're going to recast him. So Marvel is already having problems. Obviously, Disney Plus is a cash-burning nightmare for Disney. And Disney has already admitted that they're spending too much effort on messaging in their movies, and they're forgetting to make movies that tell stories that have characters anybody actually cares about, instead of just saying the right political things to appease a certain segment of the audience. Well, now they have even more problems because they just spent the last 2 years developing this big bad villain, Kang, starring Jonathan Majors, and now they're just going to recast him right in the middle of that phase. So more trouble at Disney, more problems at Marvel. Again, congratulations, Disney. You guys have really accomplished something phenomenal. You have figured out how to lose money with Marvel and Star Wars, and that's just an amazing feat. It really is. And last thing I want to talk about here, this guy. Anybody remember the most interesting man in the world? Well, he's now pumping Bitcoin ETFs. There was a commercial was out yesterday. I believe it was for Bitwise. I don't remember the name of the company. Obviously, the ad did not make an impression on me, but the most interesting man in the world, minus the beer, is now saying buy this Bitcoin ETF. And that's kind of interesting because no Bitcoin ETFs have been approved yet, and they're already advertising these things to consumers. Look, the Bitcoin community is so excited about this Bitcoin ETF, and they think it's going to be this big Bitcoin bonanza, and the institutional money is just going to come flowing in. And maybe there's going to be some of that, but anytime you get this much hype around a certain event, almost always it ends up being a selling of the news event. So I like Bitcoin. I buy a little bit of Bitcoin every week. I own it. I have no plans to sell it anytime soon. I'm just in accumulation mode. But I get the sinking feeling that the Bitcoin ETF approval, when it finally happens, it's going to be a selling of the news event. There's just too many people saying Bitcoin is going to skyrocket when it happens that I just call it a hunch. People are going to dump it and they're going to sell into it, and it's going to end up being selling the news. But at the moment, Bitcoin doesn't care. It is up again today, $42,670 for the price of Bitcoin. It just keeps going up along with the price of everything else because, well, number go up. That's what things do these days. We are in a blow off top in pretty much everything. And I just want to say thank you very much to Nashville Pasta Man. It says, I'm just starting a $2 million renovation. Labor costs have dropped. Everyone is out of work. Builders have stopped building and subcontractors are scrambling. You know, Nashville, I haven't seen that firsthand, but I have seen a lot of talk. Like I follow some handyman channels on YouTube and things like that. And a lot of these guys are saying in 2020 and 2021, the phone would not stop ringing. And then all of a sudden this year, it just dropped off a cliff. I've seen this in a couple of places now. And now your data point says exactly the same thing. Pay attention, soft landing people, because there is another anecdote, another data point that says the economy is slowing. Hey, I get it, AI and NVIDIA, and they're moving money around in circles to make it look like earnings growth. That's great. But at the end of the day, the actual economy in the world of people buying and selling things and performing services is slowing. And you can see it right there in Nashville Pasta Man. Now, he is doing a $2 million reno, so there is still economic activity there, but his labor costs are going down. That's interesting. Everyone out of work. Builders stop building. Subcontractors scrambling. So sounds like Pasta Man can name his price. Good luck with the reno, Nashville. Thank you, sir, for the super chat and the support of the channel. And thanks for that data point. That's a fantastic data point. Appreciate that one, sir. And thank you, Steve Woitis. Says, regarding the S&P 500 ETF inflow, who is buying this? Retail is buying this. Markets have been fighting the Fed for 2 years now. Yeah, the markets have been fighting the Fed. That's a very good point. And rule number one is don't do that. Don't fight the Fed. But I would add that didn't the market kind of win this one? The market did fight the Fed and the market won, didn't it? Because Jerome Powell surrendered last Wednesday. I mean, Powell came out at Spelman College and he said, I am not even thinking about cutting rates. It is premature. We're not done fighting inflation. The market gave him the finger and the market said, up we go. We don't believe you, Jay Powell. And then on Wednesday, Jerome Powell said, yeah, remember when I said no rate cuts? Sorry, I meant possibly 3 rate cuts next year. The market says, middle finger, Jay Powell. You say 3 rate cuts. I want 6. And then, of course, we get this parade of jawboning morons who say, we're not even talking about cutting rates, even though you just talked about cutting rates. And then the next guy comes out and talks about cutting rates right after said that. So the Fed contradicting itself before contradicting itself and then going ahead and contradicting itself. Go ahead and figure out what you want to do with your money when you get that kind of clarity from our central bankers. But it's retail buying, Steve. Retail is pouring in right now, aided by the nonstop cheerleading on CNBC and Bloomberg about a soft landing, which, guys, I just saw an article the other day that said homelessness is up 12% year over year. In 1 year, homelessness is up 12%, the highest ever. And they're on CNBC talking about a soft landing. The disconnect is unbelievably wide right now. The gap, and that's the exploding wealth gap. That's inflation making the rich richer and the poor poorer right there. Stocks hitting all-time highs as homelessness hits all-time highs. These two things are not unrelated. They are the same thing. This is central banks robbing people, stealing from the poor, and giving it to the rich. And so, retail is FOMOing in right now, trying to chase this. And honestly, I think retail is going to get burned with the S&P 500 RSI at 81. It's just bound. There's going to be a correction at some point. When is anybody's guess? But thank you, Steve. I appreciate the super chat, the support of the channel. And thank you, Madison Heights, for the super chat. Madison says, is there an ETF bubble in recent years from retail investors and easy internet investing in 401ks? Yes, there is. And there's a lot of discussion about that, Madison, because the thing about passive investing, when people just dump their money into the market and they say, buy the SPY, that money just gets spread across all the companies. There is no price discovery. That means everything goes up together. Sorry, I bumped my microphone there. Everything goes up together and everything goes down together. So you have people buying companies that are not doing well because they're just passively investing into the economy. And so those companies are doing great. And then maybe there are companies that should do even better, but because everybody's passively investing and splitting their money across the whole index, those companies they're not outperforming like they should. So almost every company in the world is just trading in lockstep up and down. It doesn't work that way. You need price discovery. Each one of these companies needs to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And that also means as the population ages, like baby boomers living down their retirement savings, and as hardship withdrawals and 401ks, which are at an all-time high right now and continuing to rise, that also means that everything will be sold off in unison as we go from net depositors to net withdrawals. And keep an eye on those 401k withdrawals, guys. They are really starting to accumulate up there and pile up. That means passive selling becomes a thing. So absolutely, there's an ETF bubble. Madison Hypes, thank you very much for the super chat, the support of the channel. And thank you, Trader Monkey, who says, small token of my appreciation. Well, thank you, Trader Monkey. I appreciate your tokenized appreciation, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, guys. Thank you, everybody, for the super chats and the generosity this morning, supporting the channel. And thank you to my Patreon supporters for everything you guys do for the channel. Link down below to all that good stuff. Number go up, blow off top. Bank of Japan doing nothing. What's the worst thing that could happen? Don't answer that. I just want to say, everybody, have an awesome day. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. I love you guys. And until next time, live small and dream big.